Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French and thank you for joining us tonight. And this evening we begin in Ferguson, Missouri. Let's go now to Marcy Gonzalez, who's live with the very latest.
We're told it could be 2 months before a grand jury decides whether or not charges should be filed. But officials here are hopeful that tensions may start to calm now that the case is progressing. Attorney General Eric Holder in Ferguson today, visiting with law enforcement.
Last night looked a little better, huh?
It did.
And meeting with federal agents investigating Michael Brown's death.
The mere fact that he's here means that there's more transparency and we have an opportunity to seek full justice.
Pursuing justice with a grand jury starting to hear evidence in the case today.
They will have absolutely everything that there is, every piece of paper, every photograph, every bit of physical evidence.
And Officer Darren Wilson, shown in this video, will be given the option to testify about what led him to shoot the unarmed teen. A source close to Wilson told ABC News today that before the shooting, Wilson struggled with Brown and suffered a serious facial injury. His police union saying it's too soon for anyone to pass judgment.
He has been vilified in the media and by the politicians, and we felt it was necessary that we had to come out and just ask for due process for Darren Wilson.
But protesters are not backing down on their demands, taking to the streets again last night, calling for Wilson to be charged.
You need to disperse immediately.
And again, clashing with police.
Get out of here. Don't toss around. Don't talk to me.
47 people were arrested, but officers say it was far less chaotic than the previous night, calling it a turning point. Live in Ferguson, Missouri, Marcy Gonzalez, ABC News. Now back to you.
Thank you, Marcy. And speaking of Eric Holder, in an op-ed piece in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch today, the Attorney General stated that, quote, the full resources of the Department of Justice have been committed to the investigation into Michael Brown's death. Holder also said that in order to begin the healing process, however, we must first see an end to the acts of violence in the streets of Ferguson. And although these acts have been committed by a very small minority and in many cases by individuals from outside of Ferguson, they seriously undermine rather than advance the cause of justice. But the situation certainly remains volatile in Ferguson, as we saw in a web clip just today. Police officers from a neighboring community in Ferguson to help approached a group with his gun pointed and threatened to kill the protesters.
Gun raised. Gun raised. Gun pointed. Gun raised. Pointed. My hands are up, bro. My hands are up.
Hands up. Gun pointed. Raised. Pointed at the gun. Hands up. Kill you. Get back. Hands up. Get back.
You're gonna kill him.
He's trying to kill me. He's trying to get back.
What's your name, sir? Your name's go yourself, all right? Go yourself.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, officer. Go yourself.
Officer, go yourself. He's trying to kill me.
Now, it took another police officer to approach the officer identified in this as Ray Albers before he would lower his gun. Albers has since been reassigned at the request of the ACLU. Reverend Al Sharpton, he is organizing a march on Staten Island this weekend, demanding that arrests be made in the Michael Brown case as well as the Eric Garner case. Michael Brown's funeral, it is being held on Monday, and Sharpton is set to deliver the eulogy there. All right, got a lot of moving pieces to this story, and I want to bring in our panel right now. We are joined tonight, of course, by Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. And guys, I know you've been covering this story. I've been off for the better part of a week here, and it's interesting from when you get outside of New York and you get the different perspectives. And I was on the West Coast here. As to what's going on, and I know some of the issues you guys wrestle with, and I should say this evening we're also going to be getting into a lot of the legal aspects with a lot of former prosecutors and defense attorneys right now as to what about civil rights charges that could be brought and where the investigations will go from here, both obviously in Missouri and even in the case relating to Staten Island. But bring it back to the imagery that we're seeing night after night. Last night even, which was a calmer night. You have the Attorney General on the ground right now. Do you think, barring another flashpoint here, that the worst may be behind us?
I would hope so, Richard. But the problem is we don't know. all it takes is one incident. Meaning, for example, we want to hope this is an aberration. The police officer that we showed pointing the rifle. But I have to be honest with you. People of color, that's what we're used to. You guys see the police in one way, we get the other side of the treatment, meaning African Americans. And so I would hope that finally what they're doing, and Ron Johnson, who's in charge of the state police patrol there, I would hope that it's working, but it just takes one incident. For example, when the man was wielding a knife and the police had to, 2 miles away, had to shoot and kill him. It just takes one incident. And so hopefully the worst is past us, but we'll see what happens with this march here in New York on Saturday.
Here's my concern with the situation. It's not necessarily specific to Ferguson. I honestly don't know if things tamp down in Ferguson. It's hard to say, and every time we've thought that there was a break, it's turned out that things have gotten worse. But let's say there's another police-involved shooting of a black man in a different town. Let's say it's Los Angeles, where there was one that was just before the shooting in Ferguson, or God forbid it happens in our area, or whatever the situation happens to be. Because then you're looking at the possibility of protests not just renewing in Ferguson, but also in that other city where this happens, and in other locations across the country. This thing is still a tinderbox on a much wider scale.
And in fact, a lot of the folks that we see, and some would argue the biggest agitators in this, weren't from Ferguson. And they're coming from either East or West Coast here, and they have their own agendas beyond just the shooting death of Mr. Brown. So, but I have a broader question. Do you think in the last 72 to 96 hours, the protests that we've seen on the streets have advanced the cause of not just the Browns families seeking justice, but an idea that we're going to have more equity in the justice system? Or do you think that people say, wait a minute, what the images I see in front of me, I'm seeing the looting, I'm seeing the violence, I'm seeing people agitating or trying to stir it up with the cops right now. You know, this isn't about Brown, this is people with their own agendas right now. Has it helped or hurt the protests that we've seen here in the last week?
Richard, no one wants to see looting. But historically and right now in Ferguson, the only way the black community, when it's all said and done, really knows how to get justice from Dr. King on is to protest. What other, for example.
But there are two different forms of protest. When you talk about Dr. King, that was peaceful, nonviolent.
Okay, but he also took it to the street at times as well. But here's my point, and your legal team will deal with that later. The prosecutor in Ferguson, that man should not even be the district attorney. Forget recusing himself from this case. How can you have your mother on the payroll of the police department, 4 other employees, 4 other family members employed by the police department? Your father was a police officer and unfortunately murdered in 1964 by a black man. And how could you represent people that may have a problem with the police? You have an inherent conflict of interest. And see, people think that, there's no other way to say this, that people of color are stupid. You don't think people of color can see this?
I can only say, Andrew, the numbers are black and white in terms of how people are looking at what they've seen there. And it is so skewed in terms of African Americans looking at the scene that unfolded there and whites looking at the scene that unfolded there. For all that we've seen as a nation, I mean, look at some of the issues from gay marriage to, we can go through them, that there seems to be more, unanimity, at least pushing in the same common area. The view of justice, depending on the color of your skin, the gap's as big as it's been since I've been a kid.
We've seen this on the Garner case. We saw this on the Trayvon Martin case. We've seen this anytime race or a racially defining issue pops up. And so you asked before whether this advances the cause. And while I don't like seeing, obviously, the scenes that we're seeing on the monitors behind us right now, it's prompted so many conversations that the country needs to have in terms of the justice system, in terms of police tactics, in terms of the foundations within the community itself. And those conversations need to be had. It's horrible that it gets prompted by something like this and perpetuated by what we're seeing on the streets. But the conversations that we've had on this show and that you'll have tonight with the legal panel haven't come up in the regular discourse of our nation. So to that end, I think it's a positive in the long run if it forces us to at least have the conversation, much less try to actually get some answers.
And I want to tell everybody, we're opening up our phone lines tonight, and we want to get your perspectives at home about what we have seen regarding Ferguson here, and also answer a question. What has bothered you the most about this story since Michael Brown's death? And you can take it in so many different directions here. It could be, and we're going to get into a second, the media coverage of this. It could be the rioting in the streets and seemingly take advantage of a tragedy. It could be the handling of this from both law enforcement on the ground to even what was supposed to be, as Dominic said, an impartial, maybe in name only, those that were going to originally handle the prosecution of the case. You can pick your choice. There seemingly is a never-ending laundry list of mistakes that have been made here. But what has bothered you most since this story broke? And you see the toll-free number right now, 38766-2428. We'll be getting your phone call shortly. And also we're going to be talking about how the media has done in this story. And for my money, it hasn't done too well. We'll be right back with that.